Welcome, listeners, to the Monthly Show about the scary, the spooky, and the supernatural. Get ready for the latest and more.
Diving into the darkest depths of horror cinema. Welcome to January's infamous Dump Month. A time when most studios put out titles not strong enough to battle the Christmas rush, or films not secure enough to grab critical acclaim, being so removed from next year's awards season. However, that's not always the situation, especially when it comes to the dark genre of horror. Since the early 80s, several popular and mostly profitable films have found success in the post-Christmas winter seasonal release. Join us as we travel back through time and discuss some of these frightful films. This is January's Past. The late 70s and early 80s marked a new kind of horror to grace the silver screen. Movies that elevated the genre to levels unattained previously. And to begin our January gems, let's talk about Scanners from January 14th, 1981, directed by David Cronenberg. Having premiered in January to lukewarm reviews from critics, yet being an early Canadian filmed and produced movie, it made it able to compete against American films in the international box office stage. It brought Cronenberg and his controversial style of body horror to gain attention to mainstream audiences for the first time, with such glorious effects as a graphically exploding head, and has since been reevaluated as a cult classic. The film is filled with actors, mostly unknown to audiences outside of Canada at the time, that bring a previously unattained reality to the characters portrayed in the story. The film stars include Stephen Lack, Jennifer O'Neill, Michael Ironside, Lawrence Dane, and Patrick McGoohan. The story is what would be a typical Cronenberg fare, a dark storyline, a thin line between good and evil, creepy cinematography, and visuals barely seen before. Haunting sets and gory effects are the cornerstone of this offering. Upon a $4.1 million budget Canadian, it went on to make $3.6 million domestically, and with international box offices added, pulling in a total of $14.2 million United States dollars. Next on our list is Tremors, released on January 19th, 1990, by director Ron Underwood. Now not your typical horror film, this is a creature feature with enough horror in its DNA to be part of this list. Starring Kevin Bacon, Fred Ward, Finn Carter, Michael Gross, and Reba McEntire. With its roots grown from the classic creature features of the 50s and 60s, this pure pulp storytelling was a breath of fresh air for those who weren't sure what they were about to witness. The charming personalities of the main duo of Bacon and Ward is just the start when discussing the cast. The outsider of Carter's seismologists. The eccentric survivalist couple, Gross and McEntire, plus the close-knit community of the isolated town of Perfection, feels like a lived-in world, as the audiences are introduced to each and every character. It's a daring and successful daytime scare. The monster, later called Graboids, are successfully revealed as Bruce from Jaws. With fantastic effects on large and small scales, creative camera work, and a great yet simple, entertaining script marks the reason why those that watch this movie enjoy it so many times, as well as leading to several sequels and TV shows. With a budget of around $6 to $10 million, it earned a box office of $16.7 million, but found a huge audience through cable broadcasting and home viewing. Now we get a fresh twist on the old theme with From Dusk Till Dawn, released on January 19th, 1996, by director Robert Rodriguez. Adding a crime action baseline to a vampire joyride is a perfect example of what Rodriguez is all about. Follow a dynamic cast: Harvey Keitel, George Clooney, Quentin Tarantino, Ernest Liu, and Juliette Lewis through the aftermath of a bank job gone wrong. Clooney and Tarantino are brothers who are trying to figure out how to survive the situation, needing to kidnap Keitel and his kids to get to a meeting place for the brothers to find their salvation. Then, Rodriguez drastically switches gears, tosses the helpless group and a few other stragglers into a full-blown vampire feeding frenzy. Gory gags and raunchy characters flood the screen in this hilarious at times and horrific at times visuals. The way Rodriguez shot a film is shown in this textbook style, with everything you witness. And once the roller coaster starts, it barely lets up until its conclusion. With a $19 million budget ending up with a $59.3 million box office, initially received mixed reviews described as well-made but overly violent. However, after becoming a cult classic, it spawned a duo of sequel films, a video game, as well as a television series. January 10th, 1997 brought us The Relic by director Peter Hames, and based on the best-selling 1995 novel by Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child. The film stars Penelope Ann Miller, Tom Sizemore, Linda Hunt, and James Whitmore. Another monster-based horror film taking place in a much more populated environment, the city of Chicago. Using the notable actors involved with the project, Paramount Pictures put through, at the time, a healthy-sized budget to bring this interpretation to life. With its splashy look and effects, The Relic unfortunately fell a little shy of profit. With an estimated budget of $40 to $60 million, its worldwide intake centered around $48 million mark. While the idea behind the story they used at its core was interesting, unfortunately, the execution was a bit lacking, as sequences seemed to rely on too many tried-and-true tropes to be entertaining. Proving sometimes what audiences have realized for decades: it isn't the amount of money you put into the film that counts. We now jump to January 6, 2006. And the general audience is presented with a new kind of horror, eventually becoming labeled as torture porn, as Eli Roth brings us Hostile. For decades, these kind of films were allocated to schlock direct to VHS or later DVD. But with the success of Saw the previous year, they offered Roth the chance to show off his writing and directing chops. The cast of Jay Hernandez, Derek Richardson, Alfor Gunjanson, even with critics reporting less than favorable reviews of this movie, reflecting on how silly, crass, and queasy the movie is, and not in a good way. Plus, the actual torture scenes are not, in essence, much different from the surgical terrors of the Saw films. That being said, on a very tight budget of $4.8 million, its box office income of $84 million definitely guaranteed that two sequels would definitely be falling. Back to the realm of creature features and playing with the trope of found footage, we watch the shaky cam film Cloverfield from January 18th, 2006 by Matt Reeves. It stars Lizzie Kaplan, Jessica Lucas, TJ Miller, Michael Stahl-David, Mike Vogel, and Odette Yutzman. While at its base, it's a story of six friends as they attempt to flee from a monster that attacks New York City. A simple idea, but the skill and technique to pull off such a spectacular event is truly a sight to be seen. One also has to take in consideration part of the success of Cloverfield was its marketing campaign, owing much to its predecessor in the found footage genre of The Blair Witch Project. Audiences were intrigued prior to seeing the movie, whose advertisement barely contained anything other than a few wobbly shots from the movie and the overwhelming image of the head of Lady Liberty crash landing in the middle of the streets. Even at the end of the movie, there's still a few questions that go unanswered. With a remarkable running time of 85 minutes and a budget of $25 to $30 million, the world box office returns of $174.2 million ended up spawning a theatrical sequel of sorts. 10 Cloverfield Lane was described as a blood relative and not a literal sequel. Several years later, the Cloverfield Paradox would be released on Netflix. However, over the years, a direct sequel to the original 2008 Cloverfield has been through several different hands. The latest information for March of 2025 has Babak Anvari, best known for directing horror films such as Under the Shadow from 2016 and Wounds from 2019, is attached to direct and revealed the sequel is still in development. So what do you think audiences thought about the final twist of writer, director, and producer M. Night Shyamalan's Split, released January 10th, 2017? The psychological thriller starring James McAvoy, Anya Taylor-Joy, and Betty Buckley. Generally, the film received positive reviews, giving high praise to McAvoy's performance of a man with a dissociative identity order who kidnaps and imprisons 3 teenage girls. Critics also welcome Chalamet's direction, although some mental health associates criticized the film for its stigmatization of mental illness. That aside, Chalamet brings forward his ability to tell an unsettling and deep story once again, using not only McAvoy's talents, but rounding out the cast with equal talent. With a $9 million budget and ending up with a worldwide box office of $278.5 million, at the time giving the production company Blumhouse its highest-grossing film, until 2023, when Five Nights at Freddy's took that place. So, if you're going to make a grounded in reality sequel with a franchise that keeps reinventing itself every few installments, January 14th, 2022 gave us Scream. While a direct sequel to Scream 4, this movie is probably the beginning of just giving your series a soft reboot and just use the original title. While audiences definitely called this Part 5. Directed by Matt Bettinelli-Opelin and Tyler Gillett, and is the first in the series not directed by Wes Craven, who had died in 2015 and to whom the film is dedicated. Like most of the Scream installments, it has a huge cast, including Melissa Barella, Kyle Gallner, Mason Gooding, Mikey Madison, Dylan Minnette, Jenna Ortega, Jack Quaid, Jasmine Von Braun, and Sonia Amar. Also reprising roles from previous installments are Skeet Ulrich, Courtney Cox, David Arquette, and Neve Campbell. In a story now 25 years removed from the events of the original, a new group of teens are being hunted by another Ghostface. But what's the connection? Receiving positive reviews, who praised the direction and the performances, some calling it the best Scream sequel. On a budget of $24 million, it ended up grossing over $138 million. Scream 6 would be released on March 10th, 2023, and February 27th, 2026, we can look forward to Scream 7. Who doesn't love camp and their horror? Well, January 6, 2023 brought us Megan, directed by Gerard Johnstone, starring Allison Williamson and Violet McGraw, with Annie Donald physically portraying Megan and Jenna Davis voicing the character. Sprinkled throughout with black comedy, this horror movie centered around a doll that is artificially intelligent, that also becomes self-aware and overprotective of her human companion, to the point of execution. Far be it from me to not include a Rotten Tomatoes rating of 83%, the highest of all the movies discussed here. While the audience did love, the film critics were generally on the positive side as well. The special effects and the performance, going hand in hand of Megan itself, goes a long way to make this an entertaining time. Blumhouse had another hit on its hands with a budget of $12 million and having a $181.8 worldwide box office. definitely pushing forward the 2025 Mothregan 2.0, as well as a spin-off, Soulmate, that is set to follow. And January keeps on giving us yet another interpretation of a classic, this time the werewolf theme in Wolfman, released on January 17th, 2025, directed by Lee Winnell.
Starring Christopher Abbott, Julie Gardner, and Sam Yeager. A family man seeks to protect his wife and daughter from a werewolf, only to become infected and slowly transform into the creature himself. While the storyline might not be original, the effect of the transformation is unlike anything seen before, giving it a fresh twist on the old, tired and true formula.
With a small cast of a handful of actors, it's definitely their skill that drives the movie. In 2014, the movie was to be part of the Dark Universe, a shared cinematic universe. However, with the failure of The Mummy from 2017, Universal shifted its focus to standalone films. The success of Winnell's The Invisible Man from 2020 rekindled Universal's interest in the monster franchise. They accepted a pitch by Ryan Gosling, who was also set to star, with a new Wolfman film in Derek Cinephantz to direct. However, Cinephantz left the project in 2023 and Gosling dropped out of the role, while Winnell took over as a director with a new cast, being saddled by midline reviews from both critics and audiences. And while there was an attempt to add a fresh psychological angle to the mythos, the movie does have moments of great practical effects with body horror expected from a werewolf story. On a budget of $25 million, its final box office total was $35.2 million. Now, as we've just discussed, not every release will be successful, but at least there's a good chance that if you're craving something horror in the dead of winter, there's a good chance January will have some tasty morsels for you to munch on. For example, 2016 offerings of, on January 2nd, We Bury the Dead, where a woman searches for her husband as the dead start to rise. January 9th gives us Primate, Cujo, but with an ape, and Sleepwalkers, where a woman is tortured by visions of an abusive husband who is in a coma from an accident that killed her daughter. On January 16th, we have 28 years later, The Bone Temple, the second movie in the 28 Years trilogy. Also, Night Patrol, 3 words, vampire cop thriller. January 23rd has Return to Silent Hill, a long-awaited adaptation of Silent Hill 2. And January 30th, Send Help. Sam Raimi returns with Rachel McAdams shipwrecked with her boss from hell. So no matter what your cravings are, you are sure to find something to whet your appetite. So next time, enjoy.
You have just been listening to 13 Pods of Horror, a Planet Geek production. Please be sure to download, subscribe, share, rate, and review. You can buy us a coffee by going to ko-fi.com/planetgeekpod. On different social medias, you can search for either Planet Geek Productions or Planet Geek Pod. You can also reach out to us via email at planetgeekpod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time.